I am going to I'm going to convene the August 19th, 2021 Zoning Hearing Officer meeting. I'm Lisa Grote and I'm San Mateo County Zoning Hearing Officer. And before we start the meeting, or as we start the meeting, I'm going to ask Deb to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you could please stand where you are and join us. Thanks.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you, Deb. And our first item on the agenda is always oral communication. So if there is anyone present who would like to speak to an item that's not on the agenda, now would be the time to indicate you would like to speak to something not on the agenda. And Janeth or Deb, I'll ask you to read the instructions on how someone can do that if they would like to.
For those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raise hand feature in order to organize any public comments. During the general public comment period, and for each item on the regular agenda, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raise hand feature to raise your hand to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. Please note that members of the public must wait for my prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raise hand function. For example, you cannot raise your hand at the beginning of the meeting for an agenda item that is later in the meeting. Also, new and important to note, I will announce the name of the last person whose hand was raised upon calling for public comment, and that person will be the last verbal comment for that item. If any additional speakers queue come up after that last speaker speaks, you will ask to email your comments to the zoning.
Okay, thanks, Deb. Now, I don't see anyone with their hand raised for to make comment on something that's not on the agenda. Can Janeth, you confirm that?
That's right. There's nobody with their hand raised at the moment.
Okay, great. Okay, with that, then we'll go ahead and move into item number 1 on the regular agenda, and that is owner Damian Gerard, applicant Mighty Buildings, Ken Bain. The file number is PLN 2020-00466. The location is 526 Bay Road, excuse me, in Menlo Oaks, and the APN is 062160180. And Summer Burleson has been the project planner, so Summer is going to start with an overview of the staff report and recommendation. Thanks, Summer.
Thank you. Good morning. One moment.
Okay.
Can you see this?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, I can. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, good morning. The item for consideration is a use permit for the construction of an 1,176 square foot detached accessory dwelling unit at 526 Bay Road. The use permit is to exceed the maximum size allowed for an accessory dwelling unit. The maximum size allowed is 800 square feet. And the proposed size is 1,176 square feet in size. The county's ADU regulations limit the size of a detached accessory dwelling unit as proposed here to 35% of the livable floor area of the existing primary residence. And the existing primary residence is 1,170 square feet. State law does allow for at least an 800 square foot accessory dwelling unit on a parcel zoned for residential use, regardless of the size of the primary residence. And our local regulations require a use permit to exceed those limitations, which is the application proposal. The project site is located at 526 Bay Road in Menlo Oaks area. The subject parcel is a relatively flat rectangular shaped parcel. The zoning is single family residential, 10,000 square foot lot minimums. The parcel size is 16,117 square feet in size. This is just an image of the existing residence. It's a single-story residence with a two-car garage located towards the front of this 16,000 square foot parcel. And site plan shown here shows the existing residence towards the front along Bay Road, and a large rear yard area with the proposed accessory dwelling unit being located towards the rear property line, over 100 feet from the residence, and 15 feet from the rear property line, and about 10 feet from what would be the right side property line to a new deck and trellis off of the accessory dwelling unit, and 15 feet from the left side property line. The accessory dwelling unit regulations allows detached accessory dwelling units to be located as close as 4 feet to side and rear property lines. The accessory dwelling unit is a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit with ramp access at the rear side, facing the rear property line, which would be along the left side of this image here, and a deck with a trellis of approximately 300 square feet off of the right side of the accessory dwelling unit. There are numerous trees located throughout the property. The applicant has prepared or had an arborist report prepared and has submitted that to us. And that arborist report has been reviewed relative to the proposed plans by our county arborist. And no trees are proposed for removal. And the county arborist has concluded that the arborist report adequately addresses tree protection and measures to protect trees during construction that would be incorporated into building plans, and a tree pre-site inspection would be required prior to issuance of a building permit for the county to confirm that the tree protection measures identified by the arborist that have been deemed to be satisfactory are implemented. The project has been reviewed against the general plan policies for visual quality. The accessory dwelling unit is contains a flat roof. It's just a little over 12 feet in height, maximum height, and will include as I mentioned, the wood trellis off of the side of the ADU. It's located 15 feet from the rear property line and 10 feet from the nearest side property line. So sufficiently located on the site, and with no trees along the perimeter proposed for removal. Those existing trees and vegetation will help to screen the ADU from the surrounding area. The project has been reviewed for conformance with the S90 development standards, the primary zoning standards, as well as the applicable accessory dwelling unit standards, and has been found to be in conformance with all standards, with the exception of the size limitation out of the accessory dwelling unit regulations, which is the subject application being considered is for the use permit to exceed that size limitation. In order to approve a use permit, a certain finding needs to be made, and this finding is that the establishment, maintenance, and or conducting of the use will not, under the circumstances of the particular case, result in a significant adverse impact to coastal resources or be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to properties or improvements in the neighborhood. And staff has found that the project is not located in the coastal zone, so would not have any impacts to coastal resources, and that the project has been designed and located to minimize impacts to neighboring properties and the public, given its location at the rear of the property. And the project conforms to all of the zoning development standards with the exception of the size, which again is the subject application being considered, and that the scale and size of the project is proportional to the existing parcel size well over the minimum lot size for the zoning district. And the project is categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines pursuant to section 15303 class 3 related to the construction of an accessory dwelling unit in an urbanized residential area. And so staff's recommendation is that the zoning hearing officer approve the use permit, county file number PLN 2020-00466, by making the required findings and adopting the conditions of approval listed in attachment A of the staff report. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thanks, Summer. Before I get into just a couple of quick questions and understanding of my staff report, is there anyone present who would like to, actually, is the applicant present who would like to make any additional comments? I do see an Ken Bain, I see, has his hand raised. I do believe he is the applicant. Janeth, can you move him over or activate his
Yeah,
speaker?
there he is.
Thanks. Thank you. Great. Mr. Bain, would you like to add any comments?
Helps to unmute. Hey, good morning, everybody. No specific comments. I just want to say, Summer, great job. And we've reviewed the conditions of approval and we agreed to them.
Okay. Great, great. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make any comments on this? This would now be the time for the public to make comments if you do have any. I'm not seeing anyone with their hand raised. Janeth, do you see any? Oh, I do see Dick Gilchrist.
Okay. There you go.
I wanted to ask, I did send a question in, but I wanted to ask if it had been mentioned what the intended use of the unit is to be.
I don't think it's been mentioned. I can ask Mr. Bain or Summer if you have any thoughts about that. And if there was a question that was submitted that either one of you would like to address as well, that would be helpful.
I would need to, in terms of who would be using the accessory dwelling unit, I would need to defer that to the applicant. The county has no requirements as to occupancy.
Sure, thanks, Summer. And I would just add, Mr. Gilchrist, it's going to be an accessory dwelling unit. That's as much as I can share.
So, and that means it can be rented, it can be a family member, and again, there is no requirement as to or limitation on who that can be. Okay.
I did want to add one thing, if I may. Summer didn't mention it. This unit is going to be utilizing a very innovative 3D printing construction method that we're developing, and we're looking to disrupt the way that buildings are constructed. It's a much more sustainable method of construction that we're rolling out. And if anybody's interested in learning more, I would invite you to check it out at mightybuildings.com.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Are there any other questions or comments that members of the public would like to make? Okay.
Hands raised.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised either. I did have a quick question about access to the accessory unit. I understand there isn't any parking required, but how would an auto or a fire truck or other emergency vehicle access the accessory unit? Is there a pathway, an access way? I didn't see it on the site plan. I saw something adjacent, I think on the adjacent property as a possible driveway for deliveries.
There is an adjacent driveway. It's not on the project parcel, but it does extend along from Bay Road to, along the right side of the parcel. We did refer this over to the local fire agency, Menlo Park Fire, and they provided they confirmed that they had no comments or concerns relative to fire safety or emergency access.
Okay. And I'm assuming in a lot of cases, the fire hoses can be extended up to 150 feet from the public right of way. So I'm assuming that because this is within that 150 feet, that fire feels confident that they can access it.
That's typically correct. The 150 foot threshold.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay. That was my only question. I'm looking again to see if there are other comments from the public, and I don't see anyone with their hand raised. I will ask just one more time to see if anyone has any comments or questions. Doesn't look like it. Okay. So I will go ahead and close the public hearing. I know Mr. Bain mentioned that he had read the conditions and agrees with them, understands them and agrees with them. Okay, great. Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing. I will issue a written approval this afternoon in accordance with the findings and conditions in the staff report. And there is a 10 working day appeal period for this approval, which will expire on September 2nd of 2021. An appeal would need to be made in writing to the Planning and Building Department, and there is a $616.35 appeal fee should anyone want to appeal. If there is no appeal, this approval will become final, and then you can pursue your building permits, and you can be working with Summer and others on the staff to do that. So again, thank you to the applicant and to Summer, and we will move on to the next item, which is item number 2. Owner, owner is Pacific Bell Telephone Company, AT&T. Applicant is Epic Wireless, Eric Lenz. The file number is PLN 2021-00082. The location is 740 Etheldor Street in Moss Beach, and the APN is 037097999. And Summer Burleson has been the project planner, so Summer is going to begin with a staff report and recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you. One moment. Is the presentation visible?
It is, thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, well, this item is for the consideration of a coastal development permit and a use permit for a new telecommunications facility on top of an existing utility building located at 740 Etheldor Street in Moss Beach. The coastal development permit and use permit will cover the construction of a new telecommunication facility that includes 6 rooftop mounted antennas, a 6-foot tall screen wall around those rooftop antennas, and supporting ground equipment, including an emergency backup generator in the right side yard of the property. The project location is 740 Etheldor Street in Moss Beach, is highlighted here. The zoning is C1, which is a commercial zoning district, S3 DRCD, so coastal zone, and as I mentioned, commercial zoning designation for this entire block that you see here. The parcel size is 4,750 square feet in size, and it does have a slope from east to west, and it is developed with an existing utility building on the site, which you'll see here in a minute. This is the developed site. As you see here, it's this utility building. It's got I believe a stucco wall and a mansard wood shingle flat roof style to it. And Etheldor Street is here on the left side that you see. And just another view of the site from the opposite direction. Surrounding properties include vacant, undeveloped land. Across Etheldor Street, up the hill is single family residential development. And the project scope includes the location of 6 rooftop antennas on sort of the western portion of the parcel, furthest away from Etheldor Street. And those antennas would be put into groups of 2, as you see, located around the corners of the western portion of the property, or western portion of the building. And the mansard roof would be mimicked through a 6-foot tall screen wall around the top of this portion of the building. The ground equipment area would be located on what would be considered the right side property line from Etheldor, and a backup emergency generator would be part of that ground equipment. The equipment would be built on a raised platform, just given the slope of the property, to create a level site for the equipment to be installed. And what's not shown here is that there's an existing chain link fence around the property, and along this side, the proposal includes installing some slats in the chain link fencing, just to help provide a little screening of that equipment. And it would be a color that would blend into the natural area. The details of the proposed facility include, as I mentioned, the antennas. A total of 6 would be grouped into 2 located at the corners of the building. This is just an image of one of those corners. In the upper left, 30 kilowatt backup generator for emergency purposes. The primary power source would be through just normal electrical service power, and the generator would be an emergency backup source. And then the equipment cabinets that were proposed on the right side of the building, several equipment cabinets to support the facility. The project has been reviewed for conformance with the general plan and local coastal program policies for visual quality and visual resources. And as I mentioned, and as you can see here in the elevations, there will be a proposed screen wall that would essentially mimic the building roof, which is the mansard wood shingle building roof. So 6-foot screen wall would be installed at this western location of the property. Etheldor in these images is on the left side. So farthest away from Etheldor, to screen the antennas that would be located on the rooftop. And just from the opposite side elevation, an image again, this in these images, Etheldor would be on the right side over of your screen, and the antennas would be installed farthest away from are installed farthest away from Ethel door with that 6-foot screening that will mimic the existing mansard wood shingle roofing. And looking from the rear side of the building, some images showing the same proposal. And here you see the equipment that will be located on the right side as standing on Ethel door. Here's some photo simulations of the proposal. So existing and proposed below in each of these images, and this a detail of the slatting that would be put in the chain link fencing along the side where the proposed and ground equipment will be located. And some additional photo simulations from just additional viewpoints existing on top and proposed below. The project has been reviewed for conformance with the zoning standards and has been found to conform. There are no setbacks, and the ground equipment will be located 5 feet from the side setbacks. There's no rear setback, no front setback, and lot coverage essentially remains the same. It's just a minor increase from what they were at before. And in terms of the height, the screen wall does exceed the building height requirement, but there is a provision in our telecommunications ordinance that does allow rooftop facilities to extend, they can extend no more than 16 feet in height from the building roof line, and the project does not exceed that standard. With regards to the wireless telecommunications facilities ordinance, the project does conform with the development and design standards. There are no restrictions for potential co-location. The development is designed to blend in with the existing building with the screen wall, as I mentioned previously, mimicking the design of the roof of the existing building. The project conforms with the zoning standards, and the height of the facility is less than 16 feet above the existing building roof line, which is allowed per the wireless telecommunications ordinance. And the backup generator is the most viable option as an emergency power source, given the limits of the existing development on the site, resulting in limited space for alternative sources of energy. And the project conforms with the performance standards of the wireless telecommunications facilities ordinance, as it meets the requirements for lighting and licensing, permanent power sources, timely removal of the facility per conditions of approval, and conforms with the visual resource protection policies of the general plan and the local coastal program. And the project conforms with the LCP policies, as I mentioned, visual resources, and the coastal development zoning regulations, which requires a coastal development permit, which is included as part of this application being considered. In order to approve a use permit, the finding that the establishment, maintenance, and or conducting of the use will not, under the circumstances of the particular case, result in a significant adverse impact to coastal resources or be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property or improvements in the neighborhood, needs to be made. And staff believes this finding can be made. The project is located in a non-residentially developed parcel within a commercial zoned area, and the rooftop equipment will be screened by a design compatible structure. And the applicant has submitted a RF report, a radio frequency report prepared by an RF engineer which identifies that the facility will not exceed the FCC's general population limits for RF emissions. And conditions are included to require proper notification postings on the property for maintenance workers to the facility itself, as recommended through the RF report. And the additional finding to make for a use permit for a cellular facility is that the telecommunication facility is necessary for the public health, safety, convenience, or welfare of the community. And the project is intended to close a significant gap in cell coverage in the Moss Beach area, and it will provide coverage to citizens as well as public agencies, which includes emergency services. And so staff believes this finding can be made. The project was referred to the Mid-Coast Community Council, MCC, and the MCC confirmed that they had no comments on the project proposal. They did make 2 notes that the project area, in their opinion, the project area is clearly in need of better cellular service, and that their empty parking lot next door is proposed to be developed as an apartment complex. And a pre-application public workshop for an apartment complex development on the adjacent property was held on February 20th, 2020 by the county for the development of a 3-story apartment complex on that adjacent lot to the south. However, as of current, to date, there has been no formal applications submitted for for that development. The project has been found to be categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Section 15303 Class 3 related to the construction of new small facilities or structures. And so staff is recommending that the zoning hearing officer approve the coastal development permit and use permit county file number PLN 2021-00082 by making the required findings and adopting the conditions of approval listed in attachment A of the staff report. And I would just note before I close, I think the project description in the agenda identified a coastal development permit, a use permit, and design review. And subsequent to that, it was determined that by staff that design review would not be applicable, and review of design elements was completed under the general plan and local coastal program. So a design review permit, which is typically for residential development, is not necessary. And so the application for consideration is a coastal development permit and a use permit. So that concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Summer. Would the applicant like to make any additional comments?
Hi, this is Eric Lance. Thank you so much, Summer. I don't know if I could have explained this project better than you did. And I've been working on it for a couple of years. Thank you so much. One thing I would add is this facility would also include FirstNet, which is a nationwide high-speed broadband network for first responders. So AT&T deploys that in all their new sites around the country. So this site would also include FirstNet. I don't have any additional comments, but if there's any questions you have, I'm here to answer. We also have Dave Kaiser on as well, and Dave can speak towards the RF report.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks. Well, I do see someone who I believe has their hand raised for a comment. Janice, if you could unmute, I think it's Pierre.
Right, let's see.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Okay, so we live in a little gray house across the street.
Okay.
We're concerned with how this would impact the view. I was wondering if you guys plan to do any story polls or, anything that would show the height essentially?
I can just speak from the county's side. Story poles are not a requirement, so which is why you have not seen story poles go up as you would for residential development. I know that's customary to see in the coastal area, and that's why you have not seen it for this project being a non-residential development.
Now, Summer, can you also confirm the height at the top of the screen wall will be just over 30 feet? Is that what it was? 30 feet,
Correct.
couple inches? Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. It will add, the screen wall will add 6 feet to the western end of the building.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So that may give you some indication, Pierre, as to how much higher it would be just on that one end, which I believe is the end furthest away from your home. It'll be 6 feet higher.
Yeah, so when we moved here, our neighbor had been told that they could never build taller than the AT&T building's current height, which is obviously not necessarily true, but it is replicated in the neighborhood. So if you look at the neighborhood in overall heights, if you live on a hill and you're basically provided with the topography to protect each other's views, right? And the community has kind of developed that way. There's an exception. There's an apartment building that was built in 1920 before any house was built across the street from it. And it is 2 stories tall. As a result, you see that the houses are built in the back of their lots to be able to see above the apartment building. Our house was built in 1920 around the same time. And there's 7 commercial lots across the street, and none of them take away our view. This is repeated on Stetson Street. Again, the houses that are built oceanside the street are no more than 1 story tall. And across the street, if you're not oceanside, then you can see taller houses. So this is a shift in, to some extent, from how the community has developed overall. But, you know, I appreciate that they're not doing the whole roof. I'm just mainly concerned whether I'm going to lose my ocean view or not. My ocean view is directly above the AT&T building right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Summer, maybe you can speak a little bit to that too. Are there 2 different zoning districts, one commercial on the ocean side of Etheldor and one residential on the other side of Etheldor? Is this kind of the dividing line between commercial and residential?
Etheldor is the dividing line. So
Yeah.
the block that this project site is located on is commercially zoned. The block behind, you know, on the opposite side of Etheldor is single family residentially zoned. Then there are different height limitations, you know, between commercial and non-commercial. And then additionally, the added layer, though, here is that our wireless ordinance allows even additional height, you know, limitations separate from the primary zoning district for these specific wireless facilities.
Right.
And so that's the difference where it's because of the type of project this is that qualifies for you know, even additional height limitation beyond the primary zoning.
Right, right. So there really isn't, you know, provided that they've done all that they can to screen and to kind of make it fit in with the existing commercial development, there really isn't anything further to be done in terms of lowering this or making it shorter.
Correct.
I mean, if I maybe could just speak a little bit, just sort of
Sure.
kind of show you how we got to where we're at right now. AT&T's original proposal is they were requiring 70-foot minimum height for a tower in this area, which we obviously looked long and hard for something that would work like that. But in this community, it's probably not realistic. We settled on this building, and the first sort of go around with AT&T's RF engineers, because they're always going to want to get their optimal height. It's can be a battle sometimes. The first proposals, they wanted I believe it was an 8-foot tall screen wall on top, and they wanted to screen the entire roof, basically extend the height of the entire that mansard shingle look. We literally talked them down. The 6 feet height is actually the bare minimum given the height of the antennas, because you have to have some room underneath the antenna for the coax cables and whatnot, and there has to be a little bit of a space to do maintenance underneath the antennas as well, like general roof maintenance. So that's the bare minimum that they could do. I mean, for what it's worth, just kind of give you an idea that yeah, because I've been on the rooftop as well, and that was, as a planner, that was my main concern off the top is views. And so having those conversations with AT&T and having them understand that, you know, they already have a building that's kind of perched on a sort of a hillside, that if they could do all they can to keep the height at a minimum, and noticing the residents across, I'm 6'7", so like my eye line is kind of like at that 6 foot ish level. So being on the roof, just constantly looking and seeing, okay, well, this is 8 feet. 8 feet or more would be, in my opinion, would have been sort of pushing the limits. I know the code allows up to 16 feet, which obviously would be probably absurd on this building, but getting it to the lowest. And AT&T, I felt they did a really good job at just understanding sort of that issue. And I've done a lot of work on rooftops, where visual aesthetics is really important. And so for what it's worth, that's sort of the genesis of how we got to what we ended up submitting or proposing.
Okay.
But
So go ahead.
I appreciate the efforts that have been taken, and it may not impact. We're just concerned. That's all. But we appreciate that it's not covering the whole roof, and that whatever effort we're taking to keep it low.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Great. Yes, and I thank you for that too, for really looking at alternatives and keeping it as low as possible. Another one of my questions had been about maintenance and any maintenance of the antennas themselves, but also of the equipment. I'm assuming you have some sort of a regular maintenance schedule. It's not going to impact traffic significantly, but I would assume neighbors might see trucks out there occasionally for maintenance purposes.
Yeah, probably no more so than you would already get. This is actually an AT&T owned switch facility, so it's basically the phone company.
Yeah.
And so there's work trucks there probably regularly. As far as maintenance goes for a cell site, you look at maybe once a month for general maintenance. More so if there's like an emergency, like an equipment fails and you have to replace something. But typically it's about once a month, maybe. Occasionally they do modifications to it, but that would be, that's down the road. But yeah, I usually just sort of eyeball it as about once a month, and there will be, obviously trucks there during a construction phase that you would see, for a short period of time, but after that it's fairly minimal. They're unmanned. Most of the monitoring is actually done remotely for these now, so you can actually fix things remotely. It's all computer based, so you don't have as many techs on site as you would have maybe 15, 20 years ago.
Okay. Thanks. Well, unless there are other comments, I am going to close the public hearing and issue a written approval in accordance with the findings and conditions in the staff report. I will ask Mr. Lenz, you've had a chance to read through those conditions, you understand and agree with them?
Correct, I understand and agree. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thanks. I do think the applicants and AT&T have done everything they can to keep the height as short, as minimal as possible. So I will close the public hearing. Now, let me ask just one more time if there are any other comments to be made. Okay, I don't see any. So I will issue a written approval in accordance with the findings and conditions in the staff report. And there is a 10 working day appeal period for this approval. It will expire on September 2nd, 2021. An appeal would need to be made in writing to the Planning and Building Department. And there is a $616.35 appeal fee. And it would then go to the Planning Commission for a hearing there. But in the absence of an appeal, you can pursue your building permit, and you can be working with Summer and others to discuss next steps for that. So with that, I'm going to close item 2 and the public hearing for today's meeting. So thank you to the applicant and to Summer and to the speaker, to Pierre, for his comments.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.